that convinced me that there was a space in like mainstream fantasy for Chinese inspired literature. So
just coming up with characters, like, and thinking through interiority and wondering, like, what are the really messed up ways a person's mind can work.
Somebody always wants to know, what's my productivity hack for balancing schoolwork and writing fiction at the same time? And I always disappoint because there isn't one. I'm a bit of a mess and I'm always missing deadlines and I'm always running behind and I feel like I never have enough sleep. And it's a tremendous amount of stress.
Before I got myself into the booktube and book talk space, my reading journey started with me just trying to find my interests. And my first genre I decided to try to get into was fantasy. The first fantasy book I ever read, I was not a fan of. So I decided to go to a different source and read that book. And that book was The Poppy War. I fell in love with The Poppy War, and to this day, it's the fastest series I ever read. R.F. Kuang's writing style spoke to me. With her topics on colonialism mixed with fantastical elements, I could not put her books down. After finishing the Poppy War trilogy, I immediately bought Babel. And while the first half of this book had me questioning R.F. Kuang's writing style, the second half immediately brought me back and ironed out any doubts I had about R.F. Kuang. Fast forward almost a year, I create my own book talk page, and to my surprise, R.F. Kuang was getting a lot more controversy than I anticipated.
So I've received reviews that are like, oh, the Poppy War is bad at doing like XYZ thing, and on my end, it's like, but I was intentionally not doing those things.
One of the biggest gripes people have with R.F. Kuang is her writing style. Starting with The Poppy War, R.F. Kuang debuted this novel at just 20 years old, and anybody who was in the social space and knew fantasy knew this book. So a lot of problems people had with this book was the hype it got and the results it led to. And this is understandable. A lot of people who go to YouTube or TikTok for book recommendations want something to deliver. Seasoned fantasy readers hearing about a book over and over again and then it not delivering once they read it will leave a sour taste in their mouths. But other than hype, what's the actual critique of her first series? And after looking into the negative critiques, I've noticed a few similar patterns. With the first one being noticeable, a lot of the critiques were against the main character, Rin.
But just to keep them interested, right? So a character does not have to be morally good. They just have to be interesting. They just have to have that mix of good and bad elements, and more importantly, a drive, some forward momentum, so that the reader is glued to the page, even if they just want to see the train wreck unfold in slow motion.
Personally, I didn't have a problem with Rin. She seemed like a teenage girl who grew up rough and just ended up in worse situation as the story progressed. And while yes, the way she treats people and the way she acts can be frustrating, but considering her age and her situation, I thought it made sense. But with a lot of negative reviews I've looked over, a lot of people think otherwise. Not liking the MC is a very valid reason to not like a book or a series. I mean, I wouldn't want to read something either if the main focus character is not someone I can get behind. But even if you do like Rin, there are a lot more other critiques that Kuang has for this series. Another big one being the plot. If you are unaware of this series, it's basically a fantasy series and a retelling of the Second Sino-Japanese War. Throw some fantasy elements in there and bam, you got the Poppy War. And this was a big problem with people. This book focuses on colonialism, the struggle with Eastern culture, and how Western culture invasive influence changed the landscape and the already fragile relationship between the Japanese and the Chinese. Yes, while this is practically a fantasy book and a retelling of something that's already happened in the real world, it didn't take away, at least for me, the impact of the actual story. Now, bouncing off the critique Kuang gets for her plot, a lot of it is the bland exposition dumps and the exposition writing she portrays. Exposition being so bold and upfront with Kuang, a lot of people criticized her for basically telling and not showing. And to be honest, this was a problem I had with Babel, at least in the first half of the book. A lot of time in the beginning of Babel, I felt like Kuang was trying to give me a history lesson and trying to show off her brain power instead of giving me a fantasy story and a good written plot. But like I said before, when I got to the second half of the book, that switched. I fell into the story and I fell into the impact and the message that Kuang was trying to give me. With every review of Babel I see, it's literally only one side or the other. You either absolutely love this book or you DNF'd it because it's too preachy. Kuang has an acquired taste that I've noticed inside of her writing. With her educational background, she obviously expresses that through her words on paper. But to some, for a fantasy story to work, you need to have something more magical to that. Not just exposition dumping, and not just brain power. Kuang's books don't really give you that, and that's kind of her problem. Kuang's messaging is very straightforward. She'll beat you in the face with these messages, and you'll just have to sit there and take it. I agree with that criticism, but there is something in her writing for those who are looking for what she's giving. Her hype has helped her more than hurt her. That is true, but it has also exposed her to the seasoned fantasy readers that's looking for something more transcendent. Her books lead into subjects that's adjacent to the real world, and she feels like those messages need to be outed in a way she can write fiction. You might not agree on her style and her writing, but at the end of the day, she has the potential to transcend into the comparable fantasy authors that everybody compares her to. It's unbelievable how young she is and how great of a writer she has already become. There's obviously gaps in her skills in writing that she can actually iron out as she gets more experience. But given time, I think she can change that or either build upon what she already does. With Catabasis coming out in August, I'm excited to see how Kuang has evolved. Because to evolve as an author, I think that's what really jumps the border from great to amazing. Iron out what others look at your work as subpar and grow as a writer what you already know, or lean into the critique and fix what's wrong. Kuang will have many years ahead of her to show us what she can really do, and I truly believe she can show us what she's truly made of.